Hi, welcome to this month's iTWO costX Coffee Break webinar. My name is Milan Palmer and I'm a consultant at RIB. This month we'll be continuing our series based on industry trades such as M&E, flooring and carpentry. Today we'll focus on interior linings and measurement of plasterboard in costX. For those that don't know, iTWO costX is a fully integrated estimating solution with universal application, supporting everything from hand-drawn sketches to PDFs, 2D and 3D CAD drawings, and BIM files. iTWO costX is available in a variety of feature levels depending on the size of your business or your estimating requirements. iTWO costX offers quick and easy on-screen takeoff and measurement that can be live linked to our comprehensive workbooks to help you save time and eliminate errors. The platform also offers a professional report writer, an auto-revisioning tool to help with new drawing versions, and much more. As you can see from the far left, there are a huge variety of file types supported by iTWO costX to help with compatibility. We want your import and export process to be as smooth as possible. Our previous webinar covered the use of doors and hardware, a great video utilizing custom quantities and variables. To view this webinar, you can visit our website or RIB's YouTube page. This webinar will focus on interior linings. So in particular, plasterboard, we'll check the plasterboard sheet sizes online. We're using GIB as an example. We're going to use standard and braceline, two different types, and how we place these boards to minimize wastage or round up in some instances. We have custom quantities already set up for the sheet sizes to save time. The dimension name also has a formula to categorize later on, and if we need to use in the workbook or export to Excel, we would have a schedule of materials. Of course, we're going to look at the measurement of the walls and a couple of features like current line info and trim start and trim end. So now we'll switch over to iTWO costX and get started. So we're going to start by having a look online. Got an Internet Explorer page open. This is a plasterboard manufacturer, GIB, and they have their sheet sizes listed here. So it's a constant width and a few of these different heights. What we're able to do, we're going to create two types. So we've got braceline and standard, two types of those plasterboard. Braceline we're going to use in the family room, and in the standard we're going to just have a few partitions here and this long partition just there. So how we place these boards is important to minimize wastage and then potentially save time on site. So the first thing we're going to set up or have a look at, because I have these already pre-made, we have the folder, the name, a length, wall area. We've set a default height of 2.7. We'll assume in this job all of the walls are 2.7. Custom quantities were set up. So for each of those sizes that we had here, we've now set up. We also have oversized. So if I measure a wall which doesn't fit any of these sheets, then we'll know straight away because it will come under oversize. Now we create measured dimensions for these custom quantities. So if I head over to measured dimensions, you'll see now those custom quantities have a formula inside them. Those formulas are relatively straightforward. It's an if statement that says if the length is more than 0 or less than or equal to 2.4, so if one of these partitions was more than 0 and less than 2.4, say if it was 1.7, it would meet this condition. If it meets that condition, we want to round it up and have the height divided by 1.2. Probably the best way to explain this would be if I just drew something in paint just here. Just here. So that's my wall. There's a default height of 2.7. So we're just going to put 2.7. And for example, we come over to iTWO costX. Just going to quit this dialog now, I'll come back to it. But I want to measure this partition. So it's 3.6 meters. So in my diagram, I'm just going to draw a 3.6 just there. So my formula for horizontal is if it meets the condition, let's say 3.6, that's the one we're working with, more than 3.3 or less than or equal to 3.6 is 3.6, so it's going to meet this condition. And then it's going to take the height and divide it by 1.2. So if we go back to our diagram here and we have our height here, 2.7. So we're going to divide that by 1.2, which is the default width of the plasterboards. So here we go. So that ends up with 2.25 just there. So it will end up being one like this. This is horizontally placed. So we're going to end up with 2.25. So that's, it will round up to 3 in our formula because we have a round up function here. So it will round that up. Okay, so that's looking at things horizontally. So go ahead and measure this now in horizontal. See, it's given us 3 and it's put it under that right condition. So now I know I need 3 plasterboard sheets for that particular wall. Now let's switch it around and go to vertical. So if I want to vertically place these, obviously with the other one we're going to have 0.75 meter squared of wastage. So now we want to look at it vertically and see if that makes a difference. So the formula is slightly different. For this one, it looks at the height. So we had a default height of 2.7. So this condition here, the height, if it's more than 2.4 and less than or equal to 2.7, then take the length and divide it by 1.2, which is the width. So to demonstrate this in the diagram again, take this back a few steps. So that's horizontally placing. So now we want to place them vertically. So we take the length and divide that by 1.2. So that's divided by 1.2. So that equals exactly 3. So we'll end up with 3 fitting perfectly there. So it makes more sense to vertically place these. We'll look at wastage in another example, but for now it makes more sense to place these vertically because it does round up, but we know that based on this wall length and we know the sizes. So I can go around, and this current line info is really important, especially if you have some expertise in this area and you know the plasterboard sizes off by heart, and you can just click them and you know whether on site it would be worth placing them horizontally or vertically. So click horizontal, and you think vertically for this one. It's probably worth looking at the dimension name now. So if we have measure dimensions here, there's just a name at the top. It's just an if statement to say that if the number of sheets used is more than 0, so if there is a value in one of these, then use that dimension itself, 2.4, 1.20. So if we have a look at an example in dimensions now, for those two measured lengths, you see the name it tells us. So when we export this to Excel, we will know exactly how many of these sheets we will need. So now we'll have a look at brace line, and we have horizontal and vertical the same. However, there's just a slight difference in this set of formulas. I've taken out the round up. So if wastage is important and you want to minimize wastage on site, and you might not be cost planning or going into so much detail as before, with this one I've taken out the round up function. So this allows me to decide when I measure these walls if I want to use horizontal or vertical, because it's not rounding it. I can do the rounding in workbooks later on. So these brace line I use to prevent sound from penetrating the room acoustics. So we want to put that in the family room just here. We're going to put it there. So I'll update this. Now if I click the horizontal and I want to measure through here, it gives me 2.25. Now, bearing that in mind, I'm going to click vertical now, and I've got 3.3 here. So you can see clearly that there's some wastage here. 3.3, and then if I place it the same horizontally, I've got 2.25. So I can test both. I can go the first way where we set up rounding functions, and this way where we can just check manually 2.25 or vertical, which one should we place. So in this one it seems like horizontal is the best choice. And then later on in our workbook we can set this to round up. As I mentioned before, if you have expertise in the area, this current line info, so that box that appears when I hover over the line, will allow you to gauge how you would like to place it based on the length or obviously the height of the wall. So we're setting a default height of 2.7 for all of these walls. But of course, using properties on add, you could also change the heights as you went along. We'll do one more here. So we'll see 1.79 vertically, delete that, and 2.25 there. So it's actually more efficient to place it vertically just here. Then I can view both together if I need to, and view this in 3D, so I can see very clearly what is horizontal and vertical, and for brace line of course. Put in my standards as well, and then apply a legend if I need to. So just to recap, for horizontal placing, what this does is it checks each of these custom quantities, see if it matches a condition. So if the length is between 3.3 and 3.6, if it's 3.4, the length of your partition, then it will divide the height by 1.2. And that will just appear for each of the dimensions you measure. So you might have multiple custom quantities in a dimension group. So if I measure just a few now, see we have our different sizes. You can group these. So now we're going to have a look at what happens if it's oversized or your measurement is too long. So you'll see in measured dimensions just here, we have oversized. So if the length is over 6 meters, just say one number, and 0 if it doesn't meet the requirement. So I'm going to use this one. We can clearly see it's nearly 9 meters. So it says oversized. In this case, we're going to use our standard, and we just need to reduce the partition so it meets one of those conditions. In this case, I'm going to assume that this is just not an opening there. So now we have 3 in there, and that's fine, but we want to include this part as well. So it'd probably be nice to use trim start for this one. So, or trim start and end. Click on this here. Use the control key. And stop there. What we want to do is trim that little bit we've got there. The way we do that is we can either right click and click trim start, or you could use this little square bracket. So if you hovered over it and touched square bracket, it trims there. So now we have 2 segments, both satisfying our requirement. This one's using 4200 by 1200, this one's 4800 by 1200, and there's 3 of them. So again, we can view that in 3D. So those are horizontally placed. Obviously we could check to see if they would fit vertically too, but I was just demonstrating this trim start functionality. In the same way you can trim the end. So if I wanted to do this and then trim this end part, I could press the close square bracket. So very useful with length in general when you're measuring doors, windows, and in this case partitions and walls. So now to round off, we're going to export this to Excel. So if you need a schedule of materials for purchasing, send it to an internal team. Of course, you could push all this information into a workbook naturally. For this case, we're just going to export the summary to Excel. I'm going to save this and open it in Excel. So here we have our Excel spreadsheet or export, our schedule of materials, which contains all of our dimensions from our dimension group. Note over on the right, this will give us the number of sheets for each. So there's 3 in this one, and there could be multiple sheets inside a dimension group. So if we shoot back to costX and we see GIB standard, we hover over here and then we've got the number of sheets there. So we've got 6 2400 by 1200. So those 3 are totaled there, give us 6. So this becomes our schedule of materials. You can send this off to your procurement teams for buying, and you can sort and filter this information if necessary. So coming back to costX, just to round up, we looked at setting up two different types of plasterboard. One was just a standard type, braceline. This is used for acoustics. Obviously, you could do the same for moisture boards and so on. These custom quantities were really important for our output, and they use relatively simple formulas and just setting the range. Obviously, you can make the range smaller or larger depending on how accurate you'd like to be. We used the options of a non-round here, where I just divided the values and we rounded it in the standard. So these can help to minimize wastage and cutting the plasterboard on site, and of course to reduce costs. Thanks for joining me on this webinar on interior linings. If you enjoyed it, please like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, feel free to visit the link in the slide to learn more, or email us with any of your thoughts. Thanks again, and see you next time.